Last night we heard a testimony about how pastoral Father Stephen Freeman is. And it's true. But I'm not sure he's got anything on Father Joseph Honeycutt. Father Joseph, he's one of the most pastoral people I've ever met. I remember years ago when I was visiting his parish, I hope you'll remember this. I was visiting his parish and he was getting ready to go out and do a funeral. And he wanted to know if I want to go along. I said, yeah, sure. As we're driving out there, he says, it's way out in the country. He says, I don't know these people at all. He says, the deceased is an uncle of a second cousin of a neighbor of one of my parishioners. I said, you go out and do the funeral? Yes, yes. So we got out in the country and we were quite lost. This is back before the GPS. We were driving up and down country roads looking for this place. And then we finally found it. And everybody had gone, but we could see the gravediggers still sitting off to the side, eating their lunch. So Father Joseph and I walked up to the open grave. It was still open, but you could see the what do you call that, vault, that cement? We could still see that down there. So we went ahead and did the service. And we did the whole thing, you know. Father Joseph is giving it the incense, and I'm giving it the holy water. You know, we do the entire thing, and we stand there. By this time, the grave diggers have come over, and they're watching this. And we finish out with singing the triple Memory Eternal. And one of the grave diggers said, what church are you with? And we admitted it was the Orthodox Church. Never heard of it, but I'm mightily impressed. We have never seen a service like this. He turns to his companion and says, Earl, have we ever seen a service like this? No. No, I don't believe I have. Do you do services like this all the time? I said, it's part of the regular routine. As it's needed, we do this service. Wish my church did a service like that. Never foresaw a solemn blessing of a septic tank. Now that I've got you in a proper frame of mind, let us stand and listen to the Holy Gospel. Now when the evening had come, Jesus said to his disciples, let us pass over to the other side. And when they had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the boat. And there were also with him many other boats. And there rose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the boat, so that it was now full. And as he was in the stern of the boat, asleep on the stern sheets, they wakened him and said unto him, Master, do you not care that we are perishing? And he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? And they came over to the other side of the sea, the country of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs. And no man could bind him, no, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with fetters and chains, and the chains he had broken asunder, and the fetters he snapped in pieces. Neither could any man control him. And always night and day he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and slashing himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and fell down before him and cried with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that you do not torment me." And he said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And he asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he besought him much that he would not send him out of the country. Now there was there nigh unto the mountain a great herd of swine feeding. And all the devils besought him, saying, "Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them." And forthwith Jesus gave them leave. And the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine. And the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. They were about 2,000, and were drowned in the sea. And they that fed the swine fled, and told it to the city and the country. And they went out to see what it was that had been done. And they came to Jesus, and they see him that was possessed with the devil, and had the legion within him, seated, clothed, and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And they that saw it told them how it befell unto him that was possessed with the devil, and also concerning the swine. And they began to pray him to depart out of their coasts. And when he was come again into the boat, he that had been possessed with the devil prayed that he might also be with him. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but said unto him, Go back to your friends, and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you, and had compassion on you. And he departed and began to publish in the Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him. And all men did marvel. This is the gospel of the Lord. I was much less than half my present age, sweet people, when I first surveyed the famous image of Apollo at Olympia. Housed there in modern times in the Archaeological Museum, this sculpture originally adorned the west pediment of the Temple of Zeus. It's one of the most instructive artworks I have ever contemplated. Now I can picture the worshipers at Olympia walking around to the west side of the temple at eventide to gaze at this heroic image of the sun god as he stood in solemn majesty to face the setting sun. Here they beheld Apollo's white figure slowly turning to rose and honey in the glow of the twilight. In thy western halls of gold, as John Keats said it. Clustered around Apollo in this image, there are the Lapiths of Thessaly doing battle with the offensive centaurs, while the sun god himself standing in the triangle and towering over the scene of turbulence beneath extends a commanding right arm to impose on chaos the eternal claims of the rational order. Apollo, the most Greek of the gods. This scene was sculptured about 460, perhaps inspired by the recent victories of the rational Greeks of the West over the forces of the anarchy brought by the Persians from the East. Marathon, 490. Salamis, 480. Plataea, 479. This very theme, after all, was prominent in Greek politics and literature during the ensuing century. When I describe the rational order as something imposed on this scene, the participle is chosen deliberately. It is an obvious feature of sculpture that form is enforced. Statues are not permitted to grow and expand as they might wish. In all things, but in nothing more than sculpture, rationality requires rationing. For the Greeks, at least for the Greeks who really count for something, truth was fixed and determined. It was beyond man's ability to control. Man could discover truth, but he could not make it. It was objective, not subject to human manipulation. It was not malleable. Truth could accomplish many things, but it could not change. To know the truth was to know why it must be true. Freedom was the last concept the Greeks would ever associate with truth. And history was the last place they would expect to find it. Consequently, classical Greek philosophy believed that truth represents an imposition, as much as the truth is one and necessary, tohen. It is eternal, unchanging, and utterly monist. Its proper standard is symbolized in trigonometry. Euclid and Pythagoras got it right. There is no wiggle room in a triangle. And Apollo stands in the middle of this triangle. Thus, classical philosophy held that whatever was known to be true was true because it had to be true. Lucidity was conveyed by necessity, so that the contours of truth were as stable as the stone shaped by the frame of Apollo. This conviction was arguably Greece's chief contribution to the perennial philosophy. Now, a few days after I had left Olympia and continued my journey, I find myself sitting in a boat tossed about on the Sea of Galilee. The locals told me that the waves and the wind were normal for the season, but I was quite impressed by their size and ferocity. But it was a calm day, no storm. But the experience brought to mind an earlier scene on those same waters. That prior episode involved fishermen caught in a sudden storm. As they struggled to maintain control and keep the craft from foundering, they called for help from a friend asleep, who knows how, on the stern sheets of the boat. "Master, save us, we are perishing." The sleeper woke up and calmly addressed the winds and the waves. "All right, gentlemen, he said, "if you please. That will be quite enough." And immediately, we are informed, the wind died down and the waves came to a rest. Now, the similarity between the two scenes, Apollo with the centaurs and Jesus with the storm, serves chiefly to highlight a contrast. It is this: the truth conveyed in the case of Jesus is not necessary. It is historical and therefore contingent. It's backed up by no explanatory or metaphysical necessity. The truth in Christ is an absolutely free gift. It is revealed in the experience of grace and election. Its perception relies on no prior theory, logical presupposition, or antecedent principle. The truth revealed in Christ is pure grace. It is truth freely given and freely received. It's a different kind of truth. It's a truth that makes you free because it's freely given. We recognize this truth not because we recognize that it must be true, but because we perceive it to be true. No one, in my opinion, no one in the Christian church has expressed that better than St. Augustine of Hippo, one of the greatest of the fathers of the church, recommended without reservation by 3 ecumenical councils, who makes this very strong distinction between what must be true and what is true. The one is deduced by logic. The other is perceived in faith. This truth is intrinsically tautological. There is no necessity that warrants or explains it. The truth revealed in Christ is perceived by faith, in which there is no place for monist metaphysics or prior justification. It is from Alpha to Omega, all grace, and is known in revelation and election. This, in fact, is what is meant by the divine election. But one knows God as chosen by God and choosing God in the knowledge. The stability of this revealed truth depends not on unchanging eternal laws. It's not the truth of the multiplication table. It's something closer to the truth of the periodic table. It's revealed through the personal fidelity of the one revealing. It is the order imposed on wind and waves, but it is an extension of the gracious act that created the wind and the waves. Jesus does not represent the commanding claims of a rational and eternal order. He is rather the embodied image of the Father, freely choosing, freely electing, inviting us to be His children. The oneness of this revealed God is not an inference drawn from a syllogistic necessity, but the immediate revelation of the voice that proclaims, "The Father and I are one," and "He who sees me sees the Father." Now, in this story, the storm ends with a question. Who is this? Who is this? And there's where the story ends. Mark's readers know exactly who this is because Mark had already identified him in the first verse of the Gospel. The arche, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. The external storm on the sea is immediately followed by another storm. The account of the demoniac of Gadara. Now, one ends chapter 4, the other begins chapter 5, so we tend not to read them together. Okay. That's one of those things. I mean, I'm not against dividing the Bible, you know, in chapters. I'm not, you know, Stephen Langton got that part right. But remember that the ancients did not read it that way. The two accounts are joined thematically and by imagery, just as the next two stories, which is the one with the issue of blood and the raising of Jairus' daughter. They go together. So Jesus has no sooner calmed the waters of the lake than he abruptly shakes them again into turmoil by sending down a whole legion of demons. There are 6,000 foot soldiers in a legion. Okay. And there were 2,000 pigs. That's 3 demons per pig, the way I figure it. Although math is not my strong point. The question posed at the end of the first story, who is this, is answered in the second story. What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Question posed, question answered. In fact, this is a baptismal question, isn't it? Both things happen there in connection with the water. Seven times when the priest baptizes somebody into the church, 7 times he calls for a commitment to Christ. Okay. First, do you receive him? Do you accept him? Do you profess him? And then have you? Okay. At All Saints, we do that with ascending gradations of volume. So they haven't gotten it by the 7th time, you know. It's a baptismal question. The Ethiopian inquires, see, here is water. What hinders me from being baptized? If you believe with all your heart, answers Philip, you may. And he answered, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Baptismal confession. And right away is baptized. And the demons, like the army of Pharaoh, are left in the waters. At the end of each storm, there is peace and calm. Mark writes, the wind ceased and there was great calm. The second account likewise informs us, then they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man seated, clothed, in his right mind. Amen.